your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. The Prairie provinces are speaking out against a proposal by the federal Liberals to expand the definition of what firearms should be included in gun control legislation. The Liberals say their proposed definition of a prohibited assault-style rifle applies only to guns that belong on the battlefield. But Conservative MPs say the federal move would outlaw large numbers of ordinary hunting rifles and shotguns. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba say in a joint release that such a change would criminalize hunters, farmers, and target shooters. Alberta is still forecasting a massive budget surplus in its latest financial update. Finance Minister Travis Taves says the United Conservative Party government is expecting a $12.3 billion surplus, down about $1 billion from the previous estimate. The projected windfall is mainly due to very high oil prices. The opposition NDP says the government should spend more to fix the overburdened health system. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith held her address on Tuesday night, but many are looking at the announcement as a kickoff to the election campaign. The election is slated for next May. Some of the highlights include the province eliminating the remaining 4.5 cents per litre of provincial fuel tax. For seniors and families with dependent children under the age of 18, $600 over 6 months will be provided per child and per senior. It will be targeted to families with household incomes below $180,000 per year. The same $600 amount will be given to those who collect AISH, PPD, and income support. Smith also said her government will index all provincial tax brackets retroactive to 2022, resulting in larger rebates when taxes are filed. Premier Smith says it was important for her government to address the inflation and affordability crisis, which she blames on the Trudeau Liberals.
The severity of this crisis has been primarily caused by years of record spending and debt by the federal government in Ottawa, combined with a continual string of anti-energy policies that are driving up the price of fuel, electricity, heating, food, and everything else we need to live and raise our families. Too many moms and dads are having to choose between nutritious food for their children and making their rising mortgage payments. Many seniors are choosing between filling their needed prescriptions and fuel for their vehicles. As a province, we can't solve this inflation crisis on our own. But due to our strong fiscal position and balanced budget, we can offer substantial relief so Albertans and their families are better able to manage through this storm.
Our legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, says when it comes to a break at the pumps for Albertans, it may be long-term.
And it sounds like it may be gone forever at some point. There was sort of this hint in her speech that it was going to be sort of an indefinite removal of the fuel tax. So, people see about 4.5 cents off the cost of gas in the next little bit here, and then certainly continuing. And that's for at least the next 6 months. And then they're looking at some way to sort of make it more permanent. That's one of the measures, and I think probably the one that people are going to notice the most immediately.
Dotson says the Alberta Sovereignty Act will be Premier Smith's first order of business when the legislature returns next week. Needless to say, the opposition NDP was not impressed with Premier Smith's announcements. Alberta's NDP leader Rachel Notley says many of the new spending initiatives by the UCP are from undoing problems the party originally created.
What we just heard was Danielle Smith claiming she's going to undo the affordability crisis that the UCP government has actually contributed to by reversing many of their own bad decisions. Decisions that have cost Albertans well over $2 billion to date. We're not buying it, and neither should you. In fact, many people won't remember, but 6 months prior to the last election, the UCP voted to increase benefits for vulnerable Albertans, only to then break that promise within weeks of taking office. Here we go again. We couldn't trust the UCP then, and we definitely can't trust them now.
Switching gears away from politics, here's something you don't see every day. Ostriches on the loose in the southern Alberta town of Taber, which is located around 50 kilometers northeast of Lethbridge. RCMP were trying to round up about 20 ostriches, which escaped from a nearby farm. Taber police say the birds created traffic hazards after making their way out of town. Sadly, one of the birds was hit and killed by a vehicle on the roadway. Fortunately, no people were injured. Police say all but 2 of the ostriches have since been recaptured. The hunt continues, and thanks to Fireman 2017 for supplying the footage. Up next, should a patient be taken off of an organ transplant list because they're not vaccinated? We dive into that issue after the break. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is calling on Danielle Smith's government in Alberta to change some healthcare policies, in particular allowing those who have been unvaccinated against COVID-19 to receive life-saving organ transplants. John Carpe is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. He joined Hal Roberts earlier this week from Calgary to discuss a case involving a woman named Sheila Annette Lewis. Take a look.
Now, John, this stems from a case involving Sheila Lewis, who was allegedly taken off of a life-saving organ transplant list when doctors at an Alberta hospital said she could not receive a transplant unless she got the jab.
So there's an ethical principle of informed voluntary consent that needs to be applied to all medical treatments. And here we've got Alberta Health Services blatantly violating that by pressuring this lady to get the COVID vaccine and telling her that unless she does so, she will be kicked off the organ transplant waiting list. So she's going to die. We are not yet successful in the courts. We've had some setbacks. However, Premier Danielle Smith can solve this problem tomorrow simply by instructing Alberta Health Services to stop discriminating against Sheila Annette Lewis and other organ transplant patients.
Now, you sent a letter to Alberta Health Services demanding that Ms. Lewis not be removed from her position on the transplant list. Where does it stand now? Have they gotten back to you?
We have not had a positive response yet from Alberta Health Services, but this is why we're urging people to contact Premier Danielle Smith, because she has that authority along with the Health Minister, Jason Copping, and the 2 of them are in a position to instruct Alberta Health Services to stop this lethal discrimination against patients that are on organ transplant waiting lists.
Okay, thanks so much, John. That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joining us from Calgary.
Now that we've heard from her lawyer, we want to let Sheila Annette Lewis share her own story with you. Sheila has a terminal medical condition and needs an organ transplant to survive. Alberta Health Services physicians have allegedly removed her from the high priority organ transplant waiting list because she refuses to take the COVID vaccine. The question is this unethical, and some would even say immoral, to deny life-saving surgery in this case? Here's part 1 of Naveen Day's interview with Sheila Annette Lewis and her side of the story.
What kind of impact this has had on you once you heard that you were refused surgery because of your refusal to get the COVID jab?
Well, it was a lot of mental anguish. There was anger. There was stress, disbelief, depression, you name it. It's all there, and it's there every day still. And as days go on, it just gets worse. Like, for example, I haven't been out of my house for 6 months. I have not been out of my house for 6 months. I can't go to a grocery store. I cannot go pay a bill at a bank. I cannot do nothing. I tried. It was on Saturday last weekend. My sons were here and they helped me with the hookup of my oxygen, of course. And I made it as far as the vehicle, which is 2 feet in front of my house. And my oxygen levels went from 99, which they're supposed to be at, or 98, to 56 within, 40 seconds, 50 seconds. So yeah, so I immediately tugged on the cord, because that's our cue. Tug on the cord if you're panicking or you're in distress or whatever. I just yanked that cord and they knew to bring me back in. So my son came out and got me. He brought out another tank to help me get oxygen first. And then when I got a little bit of oxygen in me, excuse me, they took me back in the house and I couldn't go to the appointment. And that was the first time I tried in about 6 months because it was an important appointment, very important that I get this done, but I couldn't get it done because I didn't have enough oxygen in my blood to go. So that's how close we're getting. So I'm angry and I'm scared. Yes, I am. And I got a lot to live for. I really do. And I got grandchildren. I got children, like they're grown men, but they're my kids. I'm 58 years old and I don't want to die. I done everything this transplant asked me to do, and it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. This vaccine got in the way.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, we hear part 2 of Sheila's story. Stay with us.
I was very, very healthy. The only thing I'm not healthy is the organ that I need for the transplant. Every other organ I have is very healthy. They're all tested. I am very healthy. My heart is very healthy. Everything.
Welcome back. In part 1, we heard about the struggle and stress that Sheila Annette Lewis and her family are enduring. The constant pain and difficulty would come to an end, though, if the courts would rule in her favor and force the doctors to place her back on the transplant list. In part 2, we hear from Miss Lewis about her struggles against the Alberta government's health system in her quest for a longer life. Have a look.
Annette, many people I'm sure have asked you, why not just get the vaccine? If your life is already in jeopardy without this transplant surgery, why don't you just get the jab so you can get your surgery?
I had 2 expert immunologists in a lower course testify on my behalf, and they have 30 years experience. One has 30 years, Dr. Brian Bridle, and the other expert witness has 35, Dr. Bonnie Millard. She also testified that the mRNA spike protein that's in the vaccine will travel to the organ that I need to survive.
Oh, wow.
And it will kill me.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people say the same thing. They ask the same question. If I'm faced with death, like if I have a death sentence in front of me, why not get this vaccine? Because if I get it, it's going to travel to the organ that I need the transplant for. And I won't make that table. I will not make it to the table. I know I won't. When you put a lottery, $1 million lottery, like Alberta did, Jason Kenney did, on the table for anybody to get that vaccine, come and get the vaccine. We're going to have a lottery for $1 million. That tells me something right there about that vaccine. Never in history has there ever been a lottery on a vaccine. The transplant team, one of the conditions to get on a transplant was to get all my childhood vaccines all over again because they couldn't find the chart for my childhood vaccines that I took already. So I said, fine. I redid them all, every one of them. Got them all done. It took a year. And I got every vaccine they asked me to do until COVID-19 vaccine hit the table. It wasn't a written policy. That policy was not a written policy. They sat around the table, made a clinical decision on a vaccine that had no written policy at the time.
So some say that you are an anti-vaxxer, but you just said that you went along with your doctor's advice to get your childhood vaccines updated then.
I'm definitely not an anti-vaxxer, believe me, in any way, shape, or form. I got every vaccine, and believe me, there's a lot of childhood vaccines that we forget about, but there was a lot I had to redo. I got all my paperwork, I got all the credentials, a copy of everything I redone as a vaccine as a child. I got them all done. And no, I'm definitely not anti-vaccine, believe me. I'm only anti-vaccine when it comes to COVID-19 only. Any other vaccine, I got the flu shot 2 years in a row they asked me to. They told me my boys had to get the vaccine. And I said, why would my boys need to get a COVID-19 vaccine? Well, to protect you. And I said, but if I get the vaccine, ain't I protected? Well, yes, but your sons need to get it as well. And I said, oh, it didn't make sense to me. So there's so many things around it that didn't make sense at all. And I got the flu vaccine. They told me to get it, so I went and got it. Never in my life did I get a flu vaccine because I was very healthy. And I was young. I didn't think I needed it. So I went and got it 2 years in a row because they told me to. I done everything you can imagine that transplant team asked me to do. I done it. And I made it to transplant list. I was very, very healthy. The only thing I'm not healthy is the organ that I need for the transplant. Every other organ I have is very healthy. They're all tested. I am very healthy. My heart is very healthy. Everything.
Now, Annette, did these doctors ever test you to see if you are naturally immune to COVID-19? And if not, did you ever ask them to test you? And what did they say?
We don't do that anymore. And I said, what are you talking about? You don't do it anymore. He said, no, they don't do that anymore, Annette. And I said, well, I like to be tested to see if I've had COVID before. I know I did. I've had the flu before. I had it in 2020, the end of 2020, around November, December 2020. I had it twice within 1 month. And I was sick, really sick. And that was before I got really bad. So I asked him to test me. And to this day, he said he would get back to me about it, but they never ever did.
You can find that entire interview with Sheila Lewis on the Bridge City News YouTube channel. After the break, an MLA wants an inquiry into her province's response to the pandemic. So don't go away. There have been ample discussions about the COVID pandemic and the actions taken by the Canadian and provincial governments in response to the virus. An MLA in Saskatchewan has launched a petition for a commission of inquiry into that province's government's response to the pandemic. I sat down with Nadine Wilson, MLA for Saskatchewan Rivers, to discuss this.
I'm in the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly building today because we're in session. The 29th session of Saskatchewan. So I'm sitting currently in opposition from the Saskatchewan Party government, who I had previously been with for 12 years.
Okay, wow. And I know that you have launched this petition on your website. So before we get into that, tell me about some of the things that you've been seeing across Saskatchewan since the pandemic started. You've been there for a while. You were mentioning you've been in the legislature for 14 years, so you've seen a lot.
That's true, Jeanette. 14 years of listening to the people, because we are the servants of the public. But the last 2 years has shown me there's been some changes in what's happening in the world and particularly in Saskatchewan. The pandemic has caused a lot of rift between family members, communities, the province, and I believe the government had a hand in that. I was the only MLA out of 61 that questioned the pandemic or the handling of it, and consequently kept my office open. I had people walking in. I was so busy, I had to hire more staff. Other MLAs chose to close their offices and sometimes even their phones. But if constituents from around Saskatchewan actually was able to get a hold of their personal MLA, sometimes they were ridiculed or laughed at. So I was the MLA for Saskatchewan these past 2 years. Consequently, I heard many, many sad stories of discrimination, of sadness, of bewilderment, because we had a very good life in Saskatchewan for many years. My grandparents came here and settled from Europe. And I think they would be horrified to see what their granddaughter is fighting for today, our freedoms. So I thought this petition for the Commission of Inquiry would be something I could do to hold the government accountable, to be more transparent, to tell the people about the social outcomes that the government wants. We know we want good hospitals, good infrastructure, education, justice system, but we've become very unproductive. And so I'm just asking the government some questions as to how did you come to look at all these things that have become harmful to the people of Saskatchewan. They were subject to numerous emergency medical health orders and mandates.
Is it mainly the government's handling of the pandemic, like the restrictions, the lockdowns, the masking, all of that? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
I was just thinking back over the thousands of stories that I've heard from children not being able to be children and even going to school, to seniors who died alone. We weren't able to bury our dead. These are the stories that are coming through to my office. And it's not the stories I want to hear or that I wanted for Saskatchewan, for the future of our children and the yet unborn children yet to come. So we have to have an investigation into if there was an existing provincial emergency plan in place and whether it was followed and what happens in the future. I think our Saskatchewan government needs to apologize to the people in order for them to move on. There's a lot of hurt and angst, and the people just want to be recognized that their feelings are valid.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Then perhaps they can move on.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nadine, I understand that you are now sitting as an independent in the legislature. So what happened there? And was it because you opposed Premier Moe's lockdowns?
I did. And I opposed what I thought was perhaps a moral decay of the provincial government. I don't think they should know anything about my body autonomy. That was the last straw. That's something that should be between me and my family physician, what I do with my body. And so I thought I could no longer follow with good conscience the mandates of this government. So I walked away and Premier Moe accepted my resignation. And now I sit in opposition.
When we return, a look at the top local and regional news of the week. We'll be right back.
It's often a concept that one community is not going to be able to tackle the issue of homelessness, of addiction, and mental health.
Welcome back. The city of Lethbridge is ready for the Christmas season, and nothing says Christmas like a good old-fashioned tree lighting, which took place at City Hall Monday morning. In addition to the tree lighting, a ribbon-cutting ceremony was held that evening for the Shop of Wonders, a toy shop where children can handpick their favorite items for free. Through Shop of Wonders, families in need during the holiday season can access toys that they might not otherwise have been able to afford. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains, Mayor Blaine Higgin and officials from My City Care say this year is going to be extra special for kids who need it the most.
With the cut of a ribbon, the 7th year for the Shop of Wonders has now officially begun. It's an initiative started by My City Care here in Lethbridge. Jennifer Tribble, the director of the nonprofit, says donations of toys will be needed heading into December, with 400 kids to be served this week alone.
We'll definitely need an influx of donations in the weeks to come as we anticipate to serve over 1,500 kids this Christmas.
Tribble explained exactly how the shopping experience will work when families come down to the Shop of Wonders.
Families make an appointment, so they register. They have a personal shopper that comes with them and helps them actually do the shopping experience. They get to pick from stocking stuffers. They get to pick a couple gifts that we kind of call elf gifts, so they're gifts that are under $15, and then they get to pick one Santa gift per child. So we kind of help them navigate that process. There's free gift wrapping services available, and we host them, and they get hot chocolate, and it's a really fun experience for the whole family.
Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin compared walking into the Shop of Wonders to traversing Santa's workshop. Higgin says issues like inflation and the rising cost of living have continued to hamper families as of late, and programs like the Shop of Wonders do great things to help those who are less fortunate in our community.
Now more than ever we're seeing a lot more people use the services that are within our community, the food banks and things like this. It's changed so much, and the population is, with the rising costs and inflation and just the cost of food and transportation, fuel, etc. It's something else that is there to help those in need.
Families can register for the Shop of Wonders through the month of December, with a tentative end date of December 17th. For more information on the program, you can visit the My City Care Lethbridge website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Keeping with the spirit of giving, it's a big part of Christmas, especially to the children in need. That's what the Angel Tree campaign is all about in Lethbridge. Gift bundles are packaged up by volunteers to be distributed to families who are in need. Officials for the campaign say last year they gave out gifts to 3,300 children. This year, they're looking to beat that number and help out around 3,500 kids. The group was also presented with a check for $6,000, which will go a long way in helping bring joy to children this Christmas season.
Just like receiving that $6,000 from First Choice, we know, as Trina said, that we can go out and purchase gifts, which we have to do. Today, we will do it today, and we get discounts from different toy stores, and so it's really helpful. The dollars help us get those special gifts that we don't normally get. They will help a child's wish come true, and that's really important to us for the gift bundle process.
If you're thinking of giving toys this year, here are some ideas. The campaign staff say Lego, dolls, science kits, and art supplies are highest on their list. Good to know. The City of Lethbridge, along with some key stakeholders, including the Blood Tribe, are partnering to tackle some of the health and social challenges the city is facing. Through an intergovernmental health table, members will meet to review some of the most important matters within our region and on the Blood Tribe. Mayor Blaine Higgins says that they are still working on the logistics of who will be involved on the roundtable discussions in the future.
This is really in its infancy, this roundtable. So this bucket list that was talked about, we're going to, sit down and be able to discuss some of the different challenges that we're facing, who could be part of those possible solutions to the challenges that we face. And so that is something going forward. At this time, it's again in its infancy, but we look forward to working with all community members.
Charles Weaselhead with the Blood Tribe Department of Health says their goal is to better align their healthcare services with the City of Lethbridge.
It's often a concept that one community is not going to be able to tackle the issue of homelessness, of addiction, and mental health, So fortunately, we have willing partners with the province of Alberta and the ministers that are here with us today, along with the City of Lethbridge with the Alberta Health Services, that we're going to team up together. We're going to share resources. We're going to share, our education and awareness of the issues and problems that have been we've been plagued with for so many years.
Officials say that they are excited to begin discussions and work collaboratively soon. Well, there's a lot of viruses going around, and when we return, tips from a local nutritionist on how to stay healthy for the holidays.